Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to Kickin' Bass TV. Today we're going to be talking about fishing knots. I'm going to show you guys the 3 knots that we tie most often that should cover you in pretty much every fishing application, whether you're looking to tie your monofilament and fluorocarbon line straight on, or you're looking for a great non-slip knot for braid, or a better foolproof way to tie a leader line on. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button down below and stay tuned. Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about fishing knots. Now there's a ton of debate amongst anglers as to which knots are the best, but we're not going to debate that today. Today we're just going to show you the 3 that we use the most. Every serious angler knows the importance of having decent gear, but it's also important that you know how to tie a knot that isn't going to fail you in situations where maybe you have a tournament winning fish, or you're just doing something crazy like pulling your truck across your driveway. Either way, we're going to show you 3 knots that are not only guaranteed to help strengthen the break limit of your test, but also almost never fail at the knot themselves. The first knot, and the one we use most often, is the Trilene Knot, also known as the 2-turn clinch. This is a great knot for monofilament and fluorocarbon lines. It's also a very easy knot to learn and to remember, as well as a knot that can essentially almost double the strength of your line, which is great in situations where you're using light tackle. To form this knot, simply feed your line through the eye of the hook once, bring it back around, feed it through a second time, and this is essentially going to create a hoop in your line. And don't tighten that hoop all the way down, leave a little bit of slack, and then just go ahead and pinch that with your other hand. Then simply begin to wrap the tag end around your main line. Now, a good rule to follow here is if you're using lighter gauge line, 6 to 8 wraps is usually what you want to go with. If you're using heavier line, then usually 4 to 6 is good enough. After that, just simply feed your tag end through both of the hoops that we created. Hold onto that tag end and your hook, and then slowly cinch your knot down. Now it's important to remember if you're using mono or fluoro that you want to wet your line, because if you don't, it can burn it and cause it to weaken. But other than that, you should be good to go, guys. You can go ahead and clip off the tag end of that line, leaving just a little bit remainder there for insurance in case your knot does slip. Then after that, I like to snug it up an additional time just to be sure. And you should be left with a knot that looks something like this. This is a great knot, as I said, for mono and fluoro fishing, and it not only essentially almost doubles the strength of whatever line test you're using, but never really fails at the knot. Every time we've had this break, it breaks well above the knot. Second knot we'll show you is the Pelomar Knot, and this is not only a popular one because it's a very low profile knot to tie, but it's also great for braided line, because braided line has a tendency to slip under traditional knots, but with the Pelomar Knot you don't have to worry about that. To tie the Pelomar Knot, simply feed your line through the eye of the hook, then bring about 8 to 10 inches of line through that end. Feed that line back through the opposite end of that hook, which is essentially going to create a hoop on the open end. After that, make sure that you have about 4 to 6 inches of slack on both sides, and that the hook is sitting somewhere in the middle of the two, which should look something like this. Then, while holding both ends of that line and keeping your hook or lure in the center, simply tie a single overhand loop knot, but make sure that you don't snug that knot down quite yet. After you've got that single loop knot tied, with the bigger end of the slack here and that larger loop, go ahead and pass your hook or your lure through that hoop, and once you've passed through that second hoop, you can then begin to cinch your knot down. And like we said, guys, whenever you're tying monofilament fluorocarbon line, you want to make sure that you wet your line before you cinch your knots down, because it can cause it to burn and weaken the line, and the last thing you want to do is have your knot break. So go ahead and trim the tag end after that, leaving a small amount there just in case. You want to have a little bit of insurance in case your knot slips. That tag end will ensure that it will catch instead of pulling through. But for the most part, the Pelomar Knot doesn't really slip, which is why we like to use it for braided line, because as you guys know, braided line has a tendency to slip under traditional knots, and the last thing you want to do is lose a big fish. The last knot we're going to show you is going to be the GT knot, which is the knot we use for all of our leader lines, not only because it's really low profile, but it's super dependable when you're throwing expensive swim baits, and it's also been tested by the IGFA against other leader knots, and the results prove that it was literally the strongest leader knot that you could tie, so pretty hard to argue with all that. First step in the GT knot is to take your leader line, form a single loop, and then wrap the line through the loop twice. Then while holding both ends of that line, slowly begin to tighten that loop until it forms a figure 8 in the line like you'll see right here. Once you've created the figure 8 with your leader line, it's time to incorporate your main line. So bring the tag end of your braid through the first hoop in your figure 8 that you created earlier, and then just simply pass the end through the other hoop of that figure 8. Essentially what this is going to do is this is going to hug that main line and be the first part of a 2-part knot, which is actually going to snug against each other, which is one of the reasons why it's such a dependable knot. Once you pull that main line through, essentially what it should be left with is something that looks like this, and that's basically just going to be both of your lines sitting parallel to each other with that figure 8 that we created securely holding onto that main line. After that, you're going to take your main line or your braided line, simply form a single loop with that, and then just wrap the tag end of that main line around both the loop that you created as well as the leader line that you're holding onto. As we said, a good rule to follow here is 4 to 6 wraps for a larger line. If you're using lighter line, you're going to want to go ahead with 6 to 8 wraps. From there, you can go ahead and slowly begin to cinch up this second knot, but don't tighten it completely. What you should have left are 2 separate knots that are relatively close to each other, and the next step is simply just to slowly begin to cinch these down, and as you'll see, they'll butt up against each other and form a knot that should look something like that. After that, go ahead and clip off your tag end as close to the knot as possible, which is going to keep that low profile, and if tied correctly, you should already have this knot so securely tightened that it's not going to go anywhere. Like we said, guys, IGFA tested this knot and it was literally the strongest leader knot in the world, so definitely a knot that you can trust. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Hopefully you found this one helpful. If you did, do me a favor and hit that like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification to stay up to date with our new content. We've got a bunch of stuff in store for you for the rest of the year, including some really cool giveaways that you guys aren't going to want to miss. So make sure you subscribe, stay tuned. Until next time, I'm D with Kickin' Bass TV.
Subscribe!